Hi, John. This is Cami from the University of Michigan. My favorite thing about Dormify is how supportive they are with all things college. Dormify is truly like a big sister guiding you throughout the entire college journey. From relatable content on social media to tips on how to maximize your space, Dormify has the answer for everything. I highly recommend incoming freshmen, college students to check out Dormify on social media for all things college. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Cami, for sharing your thoughts on Dormify. For those of you listening, be sure to check out our show notes where you could find our Dormify affiliate link and our most updated coupon code where you can save 15% on most Dormify products. As a reminder, our podcast does receive a small commission for purchases made through our affiliate link, but rest assured, we only promote products that we believe in and feel would benefit you, our listeners. Thank you, and best wishes to all. Welcome to The CAP, the College Admissions Process Podcast. I am your host, John Durante, and it gives me great pleasure to introduce to you today Tessa Greenhalgh, who's an admissions counselor at Bard College. Tessa, thank you so much for being here today. How are you?
Hi, John. It's so good to be here. I'm doing great. Thank you.
It is our honor and pleasure to have you. So let's get right to it, Tessa. What are some of the things that you personally love about Bard that makes it so appealing for so many students to want to apply and ultimately attend?
So I love Bard. I'm actually a graduate of Bard College. I graduated in 2020 and went right into working for admissions at the college. So it's very personal to me, and I think the thing that makes me love Bard the most is really the way that they approach education. It's very interdisciplinary. It's very liberal arts based, and it really gives students the opportunity to explore all of their interests. They're not really boxed in into one thing. And I think this creates some really great dialogue on campus, some really interesting projects, and just students. They're really diverse in their thinking, and they're open to trying a lot of different subjects and not just kind of studying one thing for all 4 years. So that's really what I love about Bard. That's really the top thing. Of course, there are a million things I could talk about, but that for me is really, really why I've stuck with the college and why I went there in the first place.
So, Tessa, I know that Bard is a liberal arts college, as you mentioned. Can you share what else do you think the benefits are in attending a liberal arts college?
Yeah, absolutely. So, a liberal arts college is a college that kind of requires students to try a lot of different subjects. That comes about in many different ways. For us, we require students to take two subjects in each of our divisions at the college. So, art students are still taking literature classes and a math class, and this creates a lot of different types of thinking. It exposes students to perspectives and to subjects that they may have never even thought of before or wanted to try. I think that's really the benefit, right? You could graduate from a liberal arts college, and our world after college is not divided into majors, right? So I think the liberal arts really kind of parallels that and really prepares you to maybe go into the workforce and work in a different topic or subject or profession than what you studied in college. So that's really what I think the benefits are. But yeah.
Understood. And what are the different ways students may apply to Bard? And Tessa, is there a benefit to applying one way over the other?
Yeah, so we have a couple different ways you can apply. We have an early action and early decision deadlines, which are November 1st for us. We're actually starting early decision 2 this year, which is a January 1st deadline, along with regular decision. But what really makes BARD a cool admission process is we have a couple of unique ways to apply. So one of them is called the immediate decision plan. This is actually how I applied to Bard. So I love this program that we have. So students doing immediate decision plan basically are applying early. They submit their application by November 1st. And this can be binding or non-binding for students. So it's really up to them. But the real advantage of applying this way is students will get to come to campus for a Friday or Saturday of November. and they will get to take a mock style class with a real Bard professor. Parents or guardians or, people coming with them for the day get to have a question and answer session with our president. You get to have lunch on campus. And the biggest advantage really is you are required to do an interview that day. After that, those interviews are concluded, we actually committee for all of those students, and students get their decision the business day following
Wow.
them coming for immediate decision plan. So students find out in November if they got into BARD, and we get about 45 students per day. So it is a small number. But, students who really kind of maybe have a long list or who really want to go to BARD, they get that decision so early. I think it helps make a decision later, right? They maybe don't have to apply to so many colleges, or they know kind of immediately that they really want to go to BARD. So it's a great way to apply for students who really want to come, who really love BARD, and really want to spend a day on campus interacting with us. And then we have another very unique way to apply to BARD. We call this the BARD entrance exam. And we definitely have a smaller number of students applying this way every year because it is a bit challenging. So if you're doing the BARD entrance exam, essentially you'll be skipping the entire common application process. What this requires students to do is they will get a bunch of writing prompts, and they will write us 3 essays from 3 different prompts. And we will have those essays, come back to BARD. We actually have professors grade them. And if students get a B plus or higher on those exams, they're automatically admitted into BARD. So we will require them to send us a transcript. We'll need a college counselor recommendation from them still a little bit later on after they get their grades. So just so we can make sure you're actually graduating high school. But it really is a great option for students who maybe haven't had a traditional high school trajectory or feel like high school really didn't fit, but really want to go to college and continue to learn. So both of those unique ways to apply, the immediate decision plan and the BARD entrance exam, are really fantastic options and really completely unique to BARD.
Well, that's a great overview of the different ways to apply to BARD. And Tessa, just so you know, I always put the Office of Undergraduate Admissions in the show notes. If there are any other links that you want to include, just provide them to me. And of course, we'll make them available to the students and the parents. So, digging just a little deeper,
Yeah.
can you explain how applications are actually reviewed at BARD? In other words, do you review them by region or by high school? Any insight into your overall application process would be greatly appreciated.
Yeah, absolutely. So, the first thing I'll say is all applications are read holistically. We're reading the entire thing through. We pay a lot of attention to the writing, to the GPA, to the curriculum, to the recommendations, extracurriculars. We really want to know the full story of the student. But kind of beyond that, our counselors in the office, we all have different read specific regions, right? So, for example, I read applications and I visit schools in New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, and Long Island. Basically, what this helps us do is really get to know the counselors at the schools in our territories. And so we read from those schools specifically. We're much more familiar with the curriculum, and we get to visit those students, maybe talk to them. That's kind of how we break things up. And then all files are read at least once. So all counselors read the files from their region once. And then at the end, we all kind of come together as a committee. We'll have about 3 to 4 people in a committee at once, and we re-review all of the files. So that's when we make our decisions, but all applications get read twice. We really want to know the story behind the student. We're going to pay attention to everything, but we are going to read by region so that we can kind of familiarize ourselves a lot with the nitty gritty of each of the high schools.
Well, I'm glad you talked about that because many students and their parents don't understand that the regional representatives, such as yourself, you're actually at the table reviewing their application. So I'm glad that you share that with us. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And what is your average profile in terms of your current freshman class? And if a student falls just below the average, what are some of the things that they can do to enhance their overall application?
Yeah. So, um, you know, uh, our average student profile is above a 3.0 GPA at Bard. That being said, we do read applications regardless of what the GPA is. So, students who fall maybe under the 3.0 a little bit definitely can be admitted to Bard. We're really looking at fit. And I think if students are maybe falling a little bit below that GPA threshold, they can really work on their writing. We pay a lot of attention to writing at Bard. We are a reading and writing heavy school. So, writing quality I think is really important, especially when we're thinking about the community disruption piece and the additional information sections. Those are often places where students fall a little bit behind in their editing. They don't get it reviewed by a teacher or a parent or another student, a peer. So definitely paying attention to that writing can really, really help an application that might fall a little bit below that threshold. If your grades are not as strong, maybe if you have good test scores, just think about putting them on there, even though we are test optional, just so that you can kind of show us, hey, I can actually do math. I can actually read and write. But maybe, some of my years were disrupted by outside things, right? Sickness or hospitalization or family emergency or something like that.
Well, we appreciate that, and you touched upon many parts of the application. So let's dig a little deeper. You mentioned the college essay or writing. So, Tessa, what are some examples of college essays that left an impression on you? And what advice would you share with prospective students in terms of what to think about when preparing to write their essay?
The one essay that really comes to my mind as an example, I read this essay once and it was about this student who had this beautiful tree in their backyard. They would walk down to it and it would kind of elicit feelings that connected them to some of their ancestors. So they talked a little bit about their family history, where they come from, things like that. And I think these really deeply personal stories that are kind of explained through doing mundane activities are fantastic. We don't need to hear about you curing cancer or saving the world, although those things are really great. It's totally fine to write about something very simple, very personal to you. And we really want to know your story, right? Write about yourself. Don't necessarily write about, a long thing about one of your parents doing something or a sibling. Write about yourself and tell us something that's going to be very personal and share a little bit of yourself with us because we are learning about students from a couple pieces of paper, right? And we want to enhance our community. And so we want to know about these really, personal details that tell us a lot about you in 600 words.
And I appreciate that you mentioned enhancing your community. When students write their essay, you're really trying to find out something about their personality, something that's not easily available on their transcript, activity sheet, or any other part of the application. So, of course, visiting campus before committing to a school is important for students to get a feeling of the campus and surrounding area. So, Tessa, if a student is able to come to Bard, what are some of the areas that they should absolutely visit? And what about some questions that they should be asking to help them determine whether or not it's the right fit for them?
Yeah, so I think it's really important for students to start by being really honest with themselves, right? Don't listen to outside voices if they go against what you really want. So, if you're coming to campus and you really want to know about the campus, right? The physical space. Walk around our entire 1,000-acre campus, see the buildings, see the architecture, see what we have to offer in that area. If you're really looking for a lot of stuff to do off of campus, go to the local restaurants. I know that's what I would do. I'm a big foodie. So I'm always going to the restaurants, right? I want to know about the farm stands around. And Bard happens to be a fantastic place for that. So if you love food, definitely come to the Hudson Valley. But I think this is a very personal thing to a student. I talk to students all the time who are looking for a small, intimate college that's really community based. So go to the college and ask about the clubs, ask about what makes the community so vibrant, and what are students doing on campus, right? Why did they come to Bard? If you're an athlete and you want to play a sport really bad, talk to the coaches, go get a tour from the coaches, have lunch with the people on the team. I think it really depends on the student, but I think you should be really honest with yourselves and really try and figure out what you want out of an experience. Ask the questions that correlate with that.
Well, that's great. And I love to simply ask the question, why did they come to Bard? So finding a random student on campus or off campus at one of the local shops that you mentioned, food shops, and
Yep.
just ask that question to really get that insight. The tour guides are awesome and they're trained to show you all the great things that Bard certainly has to offer. But remember, students, to take some time yourself, whether again it's on campus or at a local coffee shop or restaurant, and speak to just random students. And I love that. Just ask, why Bard? Why did you come here? What do you like about it? What are your impressions to really get that insight? Tessa, what are some of the things that students do to demonstrate their interest in attending Bard? And is this something that you track as part of your overall application process?
Yeah, so we really recognize that not all students can demonstrate interest in the same way, right? Students, to come in person need to have access to a car or an airplane. If you live in India, it's probably a lot more difficult to come to campus than if you live in New York. So, because of that, we offer in person and virtual opportunities to demonstrate interest. It is something that we do track, but we don't compare students using demonstrated interest, right? We're not going to accept a student who's come to campus 3 times, and a student who hasn't come to campus at all just because of that reason. But if a student is kind of on the bubble for us, right? If we're not quite sure if they're the right fit, then we will start looking a little bit at demonstrated interest. If you live nearby and you haven't been to campus, that might be a little bit of a red flag for us, right? If we're kind of questioning whether you are a right fit for Bard anyway. So we do track it, but it isn't something that we look at for everybody, and it's not something we really use to compare students.
Well, we appreciate the fact that you talk about you don't track it. However, in some cases, you may look at it like the example that you shared. If someone lives nearby and they haven't visited campus at all or haven't attended one of your virtual events, maybe that's an indication that they're not as interested as someone else. And so at that point, you might look at it. Is that correct, Tessa?
Absolutely. Yeah. We do track it. We definitely track if you're coming to campus for a visit, if you've signed into a Zoom virtual session or something like that. But yeah, exactly what you said. It's just maybe a little bit of a red flag if you're nearby, and you haven't been able to show us any demonstrated interest. We do like to see it if we're kind of questioning whether you would be successful on our campus.
Well, that's great. And I think the message for students and their parents is to visit if you can. If you can't go in person, participate in the virtual events, open the emails, engage in the links within the emails, because that is also something that admissions representatives are able to track. And whether or not it's used in the initial application review, you never know if it's going to be looked at later on to help
Exactly.
determine whether or not you are serious about a particular school or not. So, these are good things
Exactly.
to do. It can't hurt you. So great message. We appreciate that. And Tessa, I know that BARD has been test optional for nearly 50 years. Can you explain your philosophy behind being test optional? And regardless of this long tradition, can you share how many students who were accepted actually submitted their test scores?
I don't have that actual number of how many students submitted the test scores right now, but I can tell you a little bit about our philosophy. For us, it's really a big matter of equity. That's definitely a big part of this, right? SATs and ACTs cost a lot of money. They're expensive exams, and they're not necessarily standardized for everybody. If you can pay for a tutor, if you can go to SAT prep camp, that is another cost that some students don't have access to. It's a big part of it is just equity for us, and we want to give students an equal chance when they're applying. Um, and this isn't something that we heavily lean on in terms of our curriculum. Testing can definitely be a part of some STEM fields. There are a few exceptions. I know I took an exam in an economics course at Bard. But overall, we really aren't going to give a ton of weight to exams. We're going to give a lot of weight to writing assignments, to class discussion, to project-based learning. So if you're looking for a college where you get to write a lot more than you take exams, that is Bard. And that's another big reason that we don't necessarily require SATs or ACTs. And it's been that way, like you said, for over 50 years, because of those two main reasons.
I was also curious with the increase in schools going test optional and the ease with which to apply to multiple schools, obviously, thanks to things like the Common Application, schools are receiving far more applications than ever before. So, Tessa, how do you determine the number of applicants to accept, waitlist, and even deny when you receive far more applications from deserving students than your seats available?
Yeah, so we have really approached reading applications the same for a very long time. Our values haven't changed. So even with the increase in applications, we're really looking at every application individually, and we're taking the deserving students. We are looking to grow slightly in the next few years. We're building some new residence halls on campus, so we're going to have a lot of new beds, in a year or two, which is fantastic. So getting this increase in applications is actually great right now because we are looking to grow our numbers of students, obviously still staying very small, but adding a few more places for students to sleep so they can enjoy a Bard education as well.
Then digging deeper into your overall application, the transcript is obviously the most important part of the academic portion. Can you walk us through what you're looking for when reviewing an applicant's transcript, and does it differ based on the student's intended major?
Transcript is important. GPA is, definitely an indicator of how well the student is doing, but the context for us is really important. Right? We want to see the curriculum, and it isn't going to affect what major you do at the college. So, a pretty high number of liberal arts students actually changed majors from what they put on the Common App. So, we kind of expect students to change majors. But the essay content and the writing is really, really critical for us. Like I said, writing super important at Bard. So writing on the application is the same way. And I think I mentioned the additional information and the community disruption sections before. Definitely pay attention to those. And we do want to see the extracurriculars. That section is also pretty important. It is important to see how students are spending their time. So, really, the transcript, for us, it is an important piece, but not necessarily the most important piece. We want to kind of see all together what the application says for the student.
Right. And going back to what you said earlier, you review holistically, which is great. I also received some inquiries about students that are homeschooled.
Yes.
How does the application process differ for students that are homeschooled?
Yeah. So a lot of the requirements are the same. And I'll definitely give you a link to that list to the homeschool website. So it's just easy and convenient for those students who are listening. But the homeschool essay is something that's a little bit different on the application than students who might be in a more traditional educational system. So that homeschool essay is really just explaining why the student and their family thought homeschool was the right fit. We want to see a reason. It is important to know that for us. And we also really do recommend an interview for homeschool students. It's not a requirement, and it's not a requirement for anyone else either. But for homeschool students, it's particularly important because, again, we need to know a little bit more about why you made that decision, how it benefited you, and how it's going to look when you move to college and you are learning in a more traditional setting.
Well, that's great, and I appreciate you sharing the links. Like I said earlier, any links that you want to provide, I'll make them available to the students and the parents in the show notes. You touched upon a student's activity sheet earlier, which of course is another part of the application. Can you elaborate a little bit more in terms of what are the kinds of things you are looking for beyond the work that students did in the classroom?
Yeah. So, extracurriculars, a few things that we're looking for. We want to see some commitment or consistency. Students who have been in band for 4 years and, been doing a writing class for maybe 3 years. Students who don't just jump around from club to activity just to fill up their extracurriculars. That is what we're looking for. We want to see that you can commit to something and really enjoy it and be consistent with practicing or attending or something like that. Commitment and consistency are important for us. The exception here is students who have moved around a lot. If you've moved to 4 different schools in 4 years, that consistency is going to be a lot harder. But for students who have been in the same place for a couple of years, we want to see that you can commit to something and you can bring that to our community. We also want to see a diverse range of activities. Again, super contextual here, right? I've seen applications from students who dance and they spend 30 hours a week dancing, and that doesn't leave a lot of time for other things. So, if that is you and you spend a lot of time doing one or two activities, that's absolutely fine. But if you are dedicated to a few different things, we do love to see that diverse range of activities, right? You're bringing multiple skills and multiple ways of thinking to campus and enhancing the community in that way. And then I would also add a lot of students have family responsibilities. They are caretakers or they have a job that helps support their family. These are really, really important as well. We want to see how you're spending your time, and those responsibilities are just as valid extracurriculars as a sport or music or art. So, you know, definitely include those really important things that you might think are a little bit less exciting, but that you still spend a lot of time doing.
Yeah, so emphasizing commitment and consistency is certainly important. I like how you mentioned unless you attended multiple schools, there are students that attended 4 different high schools or more. And so, exactly, that commitment and consistency will look different for them. However, if you've been in the same place throughout your high school career, it's very important to show that consistency. And I like the example that you gave in terms of, for example, if a student is a dancer, as both of my daughters were, if they're dancing 30 hours a week, that's not going to give them much time to do much else. And lastly, you talked about the fact that if you're caring for an elderly relative, perhaps it's a younger sibling, that's something that should also be included so that we're not leaving it up to the admissions counselors to speculate as to why you're not participating in some activities, but rather, students, it's up to you as part of that overall application to make these things known. And Tessa, I was also curious, does BARD offer any programs for students that may have had an IEP while in high school to help ensure that they continue to be successful once they're on your campus? And if so, can you explain what you offer?
Yeah, so we have a dean of accessibility. She works in the Office of Student Disability Access Services, and her name is Erin. She's fantastic. And students who come to BARD who had an IEP in high school, we don't offer a one size fits all program. We actually work one on one with those students to meet their needs and see what they need in the classroom. Erin really acts as a liaison between the student and the professors to make sure that that student can be successful, even if they have an IEP or another LD. Besides that, we have a couple different tutoring options. So we have a Learning Commons. The Learning Commons is open to everybody, but it's really a great, accessible way to get some extra help on your writing and any other subjects that you might be struggling with at that moment. So, what they really do is they hire a pretty large number of peer editors and peer writing tutors. And those students get paid very well and they get very intensive training on how to help their peers with their writing. You're going to be doing a lot of writing and a lot of reading. And so you might need that extra support sometimes. I know I definitely use them a couple of times on my longer assignments, right? They also work with some of our first year seminar classes, which is the only required class that students do at Bard. And those freshmen get to work with the Learning Commons to kind of familiarize themselves with that process inside of their classes. So, again, it's very accessible, very easy to find the Learning Commons, to understand how it works, to get a tutor there. But if you don't want to necessarily work one on one with a tutor at Bard, a lot of the different majors, the professors in those majors, hire students in that major to do more group tutoring once or twice a week, right? So those students, they're just sitting in a classroom waiting for other students to come and ask for their help. And again, this is a great option if you prefer less of a one-on-one tutoring session and maybe you just want to kind of sit in a classroom and do your work alongside other students who are taking similar classes in that subject.
Well, it sounds like you have lots of resources available, and I do appreciate that you have that first year seminar course to really help students transition into their first year of college. And again, Tessa, any links that you want to share related to this or anything else, provide them to me, and of course, we'll put them in the show notes. This has been a tremendous conversation. I really appreciate your time and expertise today. Unfortunately, it does lead us to our last question, which is what are your top three pieces of advice you would provide a student and their parents getting ready for the college admissions process?
Yeah. So, my first piece of advice is really to be honest with yourself and what you want. We mentioned this a little bit when you're talking about visiting a campus, but when you're even considering what colleges to go to, right? When you're starting that application process, maybe even in your junior year, when you're thinking about where to go, think about what you love, think about what you want to do, what kind of drives you, what gives you passion, and find a place that can fulfill those needs, right? You want to be happy and you want to do what you want. So don't find a place that is just great because of the name. Think about what they have, what they offer you, and if you can really be happy there. I would also say, kind of to piggyback off of that, be honest with your family. Be honest with your family about where you want to go, where what state you want to go to or country, what you want to major in. Find a place again that even if your family maybe feels a little weird with it at first, show them why it works for you. Show them why it is where you want to be. And then I would also add when you are actually ready to submit your application, submit it when it feels like it's at its best. Don't submit early just to submit early. If you feel like your essay could use another week or 2 weeks of work, just wait until that regular decision deadline. This might differ for some other colleges, but for us, we really read all of our applications the same way. We approach them the same way. So if you're at November 1st and you're freaking out because you don't feel like you have a good enough application, just take a deep breath and then submit it a little bit later on. It'll be totally fine.
Well, thank you so much. Those are tremendous pieces of advice. Tessa, this has been an outstanding conversation, and I'm so happy as I know it's going to help so many students and their parents as they navigate through the college admissions process. I do hope to have you again. You were awesome, Tessa. Thank you.
Thank you so much. This was lovely. And I really appreciate you inviting me and Bard on here to share a little bit about our college and the Bard experience.
It was my honor and pleasure, and I hope to have you again. Thank you. Thank you for joining us on this episode of the CAP, the College Admissions Process Podcast. We hope you enjoyed the show. If you did, please don't forget to tell a friend and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and wherever you listen to your podcasts. I am your host, John Durante, and I look forward to seeing you on the next episode of the CAP. I want to welcome back Sean Patel, who's the CEO and founder of Prep Expert. Sean, thank you so much for being here. How are you?
Doing well. Thanks for having me, John. Just wanted to do a quick shout out for an amazing deal that we have for college admissions process podcast listeners. We're offering 30% off all Prep Expert SAT and ACT courses and tutoring. It's live online. We've got the best score improvement guarantees in the industry. You'll get taught by 99 percentile instructors. And you can save 30% off when you go to the show notes of the College Admissions Process podcast. Grab your discount code for 30% off and click the link in the show notes.
Thank you, Sean. So great to have you again. And to everyone out there, please note that if you make a purchase through any of our affiliate links, the podcast gets a commission. But rest assured that we would only promote products that we believe in and feel would benefit our listeners. Thank you all and best wishes.